Reflecting on the past, I often ponder how my happiness might have differed had we not gone out to dinner that night. Would I have been happier? Definitely not, as I am currently very content with my life. Perhaps equally happy? That's harder to say, and I'll never truly know. My story begins with Jessie, whom I met in my early 20s shortly after finishing my studies. We casually dated for a few years before realizing our deep affection for each other. We became a committed couple, and both our futures seemed secure. Fast forward to about 5 years into our marriage, a time when we knew each other well but still retained some spark. While the intensity of our early days had naturally tempered, our intimacy remained steady at about once or twice a week, with a bit more on special occasions. The birth of our daughter Emily a year ago slowed things down further, but we adjusted and life felt good. Perhaps the only hiccup was Jessie missing her work, friends, and the excitement of her career since becoming a full-time mother. Nonetheless, she seemed to manage. One Friday, we were invited to dinner at the home of one of Jessie's former colleagues, Carrie, and her husband, Nick. Carrie, much like us in age but without children, still worked at the insurance company where Jessie used to work. We had arranged a babysitter for the evening, and Jessie took particular care with her appearance, wearing a short dress that highlighted her blonde hair and figure. I couldn't discern whether she was wearing a bra that night. Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't, it depended on her mood and attire. Her dress that evening left it uncertain, and I knew I'd find out once she started moving. "You look amazing," I complimented her. "Got to tonight," she replied. "Got serious competition." She was right. Carrie was striking, with short dark hair and captivating brown eyes that seemed to follow you everywhere. Her slender legs were a noticeable feature she enjoyed flaunting. Okay, so I didn't always get along with Jessie's husband, Nick, whom I found a bit flashy, but at least he had a sense of humor. Plus, it was nice to be in the company of two such lovely women. "Don't go upsetting Nick like last time," Jessie cautioned, as if she could read my thoughts. "Just make sure he doesn't flirt with you too much," I replied, recalling how uncomfortable I had felt when he paid excessive attention to her during our previous visit. "Well, if he does, then you can flirt with Carrie," Jessie teased, breaking the tension with a loud giggle and preventing any potential argument. As it turned out, the dinner went smoothly. Carrie proved to be a fantastic cook, serving us a delicious meal of duck in orange sauce. The claret we brought complemented the food perfectly, and before long, we were on to another bottle from their collection. My initial worries about the evening dissipated, and I found myself enjoying the company as much as the others. At one point, Carrie invited me to dance, and we twirled happily around their living room to delightful music, while Jessie and Nick watched on. "Jessie warned Nick not to get too friendly with you, Dave," Carrie whispered in my ear. "She was worried you'd be upset." "Yeah," I reluctantly agreed. "Seems a bit silly now, though." Carrie pressed her slender body closer to mine, feeling comforting. "Maybe you should tell them it's okay for them to dance together," she suggested, her firm breasts brushing against me through her top, confirming she wasn't wearing a bra that night. I glanced over at the other couple. "Not dancing?" I asked casually. And just like that, the four of us joined in. It must have been at least half an hour later, and I was enjoying Carrie's presence so much that I couldn't muster any jealousy watching Nick and Jessie dancing closely. "Shall we sit down and watch them?" Carrie proposed. I smiled and led her to the sofa, where we settled in comfortably, with Carrie leaning against me and my arm around her shoulders. It felt natural and pleasant, not particularly seductive, but very enjoyable to sit there with her cuddled up beside me. Meanwhile, Jessie and Nick had also taken a seat on the other sofa across the room. "What are you two up to?" Nick called out playfully from his seat. "Nothing we shouldn't be," Carrie replied with a teasing tone. "Why not?" Jessie's playful response was followed by giggles all around. Carrie nestled closer to me, and my fingers nearly grazed the open neckline of her blouse as my hand moved downward. "I think your wife just gave you permission to kiss me," Carrie whispered in my ear, flicking it teasingly with her tongue. Oh dear. Did I really want to go down this path? Jessie and I had never flirted like this before, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to start. Honestly, what I meant was, I didn't want Jessie to start. But then Carrie pulled my head down towards hers and pressed her lips to mine. She was the first woman I had kissed since marrying Jesse, and even before that. While I had given pecks on the cheek, this was far from that. The feel of her soft lips against mine was exhilarating, reminiscent of those thrilling teenage kisses long ago. When our tongues met, her taste was divine, different, and I reluctantly admitted, more exciting than kissing my wife had been in years. With a jolt, I realized my hand had slipped inside her top, fingertips caressing the firm curve of her breast. I withdrew it quickly. I was enjoying myself, but I didn't want things to escalate. "I don't mind, Dave," Carrie whispered, now nestled securely in my arms. "No harm, as long as you don't go too far." I placed my hand back on her shoulder. It was tempting, very tempting, but I was determined not to let things get out of hand. Yet, we continued to kiss. Then I noticed Nick standing up, leading Jesse out of the room by the hand. No. This was going too far. I grabbed the arm of the sofa to stand up. "What's wrong?" Carrie exclaimed, pulling me back down. "You can see what's wrong. Aren't you concerned?" I replied urgently. "They just want a bit of privacy, that's all," Carrie laughed. "They're not heading to the bedroom, just to the other room." She looked up at me mischievously. "Come back down and kiss me again, Dave. Let them be." "Sorry, Carrie, but this is getting a bit too much for me," I said firmly, trying not to sound overly dramatic. "Don't you trust Jessie then?" she asked, catching me off guard. Of course, I trusted her implicitly, but I knew how tempted I had been just moments ago. "It's Nick I don't trust," I admitted with a growl. Carrie chuckled. "Oh, you're quite uptight, Dave. They won't do much." "We're not, and neither will they." "I'm not so sure," I grumbled. "I think I should go and at least have a word with them." Before I could make a move, Carrie jumped up, adjusting her dress that had ridden up unexpectedly. The sight of her long legs up to her thighs and a glimpse of her panties thrilled me, but I felt conflicted. My instincts urged me in one direction, but my better judgment pulled me back. "I'll go check on them, Dave," Carrie said seriously, holding up her hands to calm me down. "I'll make it clear that nothing more than kissing is allowed, okay?" "But Carrie, I think—" "Hold on, Dave," she interrupted. "If you burst in there like last time, it'll only cause a scene. Trust me on this." I hesitated. I trusted Jessie, and I believed Carrie would assert the boundaries firmly, especially since her husband was involved too. "Okay," I relented finally. "But just kissing. No touching. None at all. Make that clear." "And what about your hand inside my top, Dave?" Carrie teased with a grin. "Was that touching or not?" "That was an accident," I replied, unsurely. Carrie nodded knowingly, grinned mischievously, and then left for the other room without bothering to knock, which oddly reassured me. She returned after a minute, snuggling back against me on the sofa. "Now, where were we?" she murmured dreamily, beginning to kiss my neck. On the drive home, Jessie kissed me but remained quiet. We both seemed eager to discuss what had transpired, yet neither of us knew how to broach the topic. My fingers had slipped inside Carrie's top once more, inadvertently brushing against her nipple unhindered by a bra. Carrie had enjoyed it, and I had been tempted to go further, but the thought of regretting it the next morning held me back. My main concern now was whether to tell Jessie, not whether to, but how and what her reaction would be. Back home, each with a cup of tea in hand, Jessie finally brought up the subject, her face flushed. "Well," she asked, "what did you think of that? We've never done anything like that before." I laughed lightly and shrugged. "No harm done, Jessie. We didn't really do much." "You don't think so?" she countered, her casual tone at odds with the tension in her expression. "Well, I'm not so sure, especially since you started it." Oh dear, I thought. She must know about me touching Carrie's breast. I decided honesty was the best policy and recounted exactly what had happened. "Oh, yes, Dave," Jessie exclaimed, reacting more strongly than I had anticipated. "And you expect me to believe that's all you did?" I recoiled, surprised by the intensity of her words, and we stared at each other for a long, tense moment. What do you think we did? I demanded. What exactly did you two get up to? No more than what you bloody well suggested, Dave, Jesse shot back angrily. After what you said, I couldn't exactly refuse, could I? I stared at Jesse in disbelief. What was she talking about? What had I supposedly said? But I didn't say anything, Jesse, I managed to blurt out. No, of course you didn't, you sanctimonious fool, she shot back at me. You had Carrie do your dirty work for you, didn't you? I didn't send Carrie to, not to. I fell silent, bewildered, trying to unravel the confusing situation we were in. What did Carrie say, Jesse? What did she tell you? You know what she said. Just that we shouldn't go beyond kissing, I exclaimed. The color drained from Jessie's face as she looked directly at me, realization dawning. Oh my God, no. She cried out in a choked voice. Oh my God, what have I done? Jesse, just tell me what she said. The first tear rolled down her cheek, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. She said that it would be. Oh my God, Dave, I'm sorry. It wasn't my fault. I'm so sorry. I felt like my world was falling apart. Even without Jessie saying it outright, I knew she had done something terribly wrong, maybe unforgivable. What did she say, Jessie? Please, just tell me. Between sobs, Jessie continued, struggling to speak. She came in and told us that you two were having fun, and it was up to us what we did. She said that you had told us we could do anything we wanted, no limits. The deceitful liar, I muttered through clenched teeth. Then I remembered the smirk on Carrie's face when she returned to the room, and how she giggled when she cuddled up to me. The conniving, dishonest, scheming woman. So what the hell did you do, my dear wife? I demanded, incredulous that she would accept such a statement without question. My anger surged as I imagined how differently I would have reacted if I had been in her shoes. Do we have to talk about it now, Dave? Can't we sleep on it and decide if we really want to talk about it tomorrow? Sleep on it? I shouted. I'm not even sure I want to sleep next to you. Jessie cried, and I sat there, staring at her, feeling lost and betrayed. This was all Carrie's fault, but Jessie wasn't blameless either. Damn it, I still didn't know what they had done. It's better if you tell me now, Jessie, and be honest. She nodded, trying to control her sobs. I was shocked by what you supposedly said, Dave. What I was supposed to have said, I clarified, and she nodded again. I was taken aback. Disappointed, really, after everything you've told me. She looked up at me, waiting to see if I would interrupt or respond, but I remained silent. Well, Nick started kissing my neck, then down my front. Before I knew it, he was kissing the top of my breasts. When he pulled my top down and began fondling my breasts, it felt incredible. I thought, why not? If it's okay for you, why not for me? She swallowed hard a few times, unable to meet my gaze. Before I knew it, he had my top around my waist. I wasn't wearing a bra, so I was open to him. He started sucking on my breasts, playing with my nipples. You know how that affects me, Dave. It drives me wild, and I just couldn't stop him. What else? I demanded tersely. He made me stand up in front of him, held my hand so my dress fell down. There was nothing holding it up. Then he guided my hands to my panties and made me take them off. Made you take them off? I nearly shouted. How could he have made you do that? I don't know, Dave. I honestly don't know. He just did, and then I was standing there naked in front of him, thinking if you could do it with Carrie, why couldn't I be naked for Nick? I buried my face in my hands, unable to believe what I was hearing. This was my wife telling me what she had done while I had been resisting her friend's advances. He went down on me, Dave. He did it while I stood there, then he pulled me onto the couch, spread my legs, and he did it properly. And you're going to tell me this was all because you thought I might be doing the same with Carrie? She hesitated before answering. No, Dave. Not really. By then, I was caught up in it. I was enjoying it, going along with it. Did he have sex with you, Jesse? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. I braced myself for her answer. No, Dave. No, he didn't do that. We didn't have time, she stumbled, stopping abruptly, realizing what she was about to say. No time? No time? I repeated incredulously. Is that what you were about to say? Jesse nodded slightly, acknowledging my accusation. Carrie came in, said you were ready to leave, and that you were upset. She told me to get dressed quickly before you got angry. Damn it, Carrie was quite the manipulator. Thank God I hadn't fallen for her schemes. But Jessie, my wife, my life, had just confessed that if Carrie hadn't interrupted them, she would have let Nick have sex with her. My mind couldn't process it. Is that everything, Jessie? I managed to ask after what felt like an eternity. She didn't reply. Instead, she burst into tears again. Oh God, what else was she going to tell me? I'm sorry, Dave. I'm so sorry. You know I love you, and I know I've always refused to do it for you, but I sucked his cock, Dave. I'm so sorry, honestly. I don't know why I did it when I would never do it for you. But I did. I sucked him off. Can you ever forgive me? The ultimate betrayal. The one thing in our intimate life that she could never bring herself to do for me. Something I'd always desired, but had accepted she would never do. And she had casually done it for that bastard. She had sucked his fucking cock. Another sickening thought hit me, and I felt bile rise in my throat. Jesse, you sucked his cock. It was in your mouth, and then you kissed me afterward. You bitch. You fucking bitch. You kissed me with the taste of his cock still in your mouth. I began to retch at the thought, and Jessie stared at me in horror as the reality of her actions sank in. I turned and ran to the bathroom, barely making it before the remnants of the fine meal we had enjoyed earlier that evening spilled into the toilet bowl. Behind me, Jessie wailed and cried, her anguish echoing through the house. She kept apologizing, professing her love, insisting it was all a mistake. Some mistake. The following week was agonizing. Well, agonizing might not suffice when you're debating whether or not you want to murder someone. Or should it be whom? My wife had betrayed me. Even though I believed her explanation that she thought I had sent Carrie with that message, it was no excuse. Carrie had lied, schemed, and manipulated, causing all of this to happen. And that bastard Nick had taken advantage of my wife. Done things with her that I had never experienced. No wonder I felt shattered, betrayed. No wonder it was a horrible week. We didn't talk much about it. There didn't seem to be anything else to say. I couldn't bring myself to make love to her, couldn't even kiss her without feeling sick. Maybe I should have left immediately or thrown her out, but I had our baby Emily to consider. I just couldn't seem to make a decision. After a couple of months, things seemed to settle into a semblance of normality. It wasn't the same as before, far from it. There was little affection from me, though Jessie made constant efforts. We shared meals, conversations, even the same bed, cuddling occasionally, but sex was out of the question. It's hard when you can't bring yourself to kiss someone, let alone make love to them. Jessie dressed to please me, tried to initiate intimacy, but I couldn't respond. Eventually, she stopped trying, and life settled back into a routine. Then something happened that snapped me out of my numbness. One Sunday, I was alone on a park bench, rocking Emily in her stroller, when someone sat down beside me. Hey, big boy. Heard your love life isn't so hot these days, Carrie said with mock sympathy, though her tone hinted otherwise. I told her to leave me alone. I'm here if you need practice, Dave, she continued, tauntingly. I repeated my demand for her to go away and stop causing trouble. Haven't you caused enough damage already? I snapped. She was game for it, Dave. You know that. Why don't you cool down and think about the fun we could have, just the four of us, Carrie persisted. I didn't respond, just stood up to walk away. Don't be silly, Dave, she insisted. Stay the hell away from me and Jesse forever. I shouted, loud enough to draw glances from others in the park, curious about the commotion. Carrie shrugged indifferently. That's difficult, Dave. I see Jesse every week. Damn liar. I yelled. Am I? Ask her what she does every Thursday morning, Carrie smirked. She leaves Emily at the creche and hits the gym. And guess who joins her for lunch, now that Nick has Thursdays off? Stunned, I looked at Emily, who giggled at Carrie. She recognized her, clearly. Oh no, not again. Please God, not this again. I walked home in a daze, lucky not to have an accident. I avoided Jesse for the rest of the day, afraid of my own anger. I'm not a violent person, but I didn't trust myself anymore. That night, I slept in the spare bed and left for work before Jesse and Emily woke up. I couldn't concentrate at work, and mid-morning, I dialed the gym, unsure of what I would say. Hello, this is Jesse O'Reilly's husband. She thinks she left something there last week and asked me to check with her trainer, Gordon. Just a moment, the voice on the other end said, and I waited anxiously. No, he hasn't seen anything, the voice replied. In fact, he says he hasn't seen Mrs. Riley for several weeks. Damn it! I exclaimed loudly, forgetting I still had the phone in my hand. Likewise, came the retort from the other end, followed by the sound of the line being abruptly cut. Sitting with my head in my hands, I replayed the recent events in my mind. What had become of my marriage? What had happened to my wife? And what was I going to do about it? Should I take action or continue to ignore the situation as I had been doing? Perhaps we should embrace the lifestyle the others seemed to desire? Finally standing up, I unsteadily made my way to my boss's office. I informed him of my marital issues and resigned. He tried to persuade me otherwise for half an hour, even offering me a raise, but I refused. In the end, we shook hands, and he assured me of a stellar reference. The following days were busy, and I tried to avoid Jesse, who seemed oblivious to my unease. Then, on a late Wednesday afternoon, I found myself in town and ended up at the insurance company where Jesse used to work and where Carrie still did. Judging the time just before closing, I navigated the familiar corridors until I reached Carrie's office. Hi, Carrie, I greeted casually as I entered, aware of her boss and a couple of younger colleagues who were also present. She looked up in surprise, scanning the room briefly to gauge any potential trouble. Seeing no immediate issue, she relaxed a bit. It's fine, I reassured her with a smile. I come in peace. If I can't beat you, I might as well join you. Carrie regarded me uncertainly. What do you mean? Does Jesse know about this? Shaking my head, I replied, no clue. I just made up my mind. Part of me wants revenge, but why not enjoy myself in the process? Her face lit up with a grin, as if it were suddenly Christmas morning. I'm sorry about Sunday, she apologized. You upset me, and I lost my temper. I shrugged, dismissing it, and asked if she had told Jesse what she had confided in me. She admitted she hadn't spoken to her since. Let's keep it between us, I suggested. I want to surprise her and make her reckon with her actions. Curious, she inquired about my plan, and I explained, eliciting a gasp from her, a mix of surprise and excitement. Wasn't this Jenny's old desk? I asked, pointing to where Carrie sat, having taken over my wife's position after she left to care for Emily. Carrie nodded with a mischievous glint in her eye. She relished the thought of us being intimate on Jesse's former desk and relishing the opportunity to reveal it to her later. We waited until the other two occupants of the office departed for the evening, then Carrie locked the door, ensuring our privacy for what was to come. We embraced passionately, and I recalled how exquisite and slender her body had felt the first time, just a few months back. Soon, I began undressing her, starting with her blouse which revealed her firm, tight breasts with large, erect nipples, larger than I had imagined. What's this? I asked playfully, flicking the small gold ring pierced through her nipple. Oh, that's new, she replied, reacting to the sensation. Got it done with Jesse the other week. Do you like hers? I nodded vaguely, feeling uneasy. I hadn't known Jesse had one either. I pondered who else might know, certainly Nick. The thought of him knowing something I didn't made me uncomfortable. I gently tugged the ring, and Carrie squealed in delight. Careful, though, she breathed, not too hard or it hurts. That gave me an idea. Next, her skirt came off, followed by her tiny panties, which she stepped out of. Stepping back, I admired her as she leaned against the desk, hands behind her on its edge, thrusting her pert breasts forward, showcasing her stunning figure. She was slim, very slim, with a tiny waist, and her boyish haircut accentuated her slender frame. Yet, she was far from thin. A woman with such lovely curves couldn't be called thin. Her pussy was completely shaved, something I had never convinced Jessie to do, and her tan was even, without a trace of tan lines. It might have been from a vacation abroad or perhaps her own backyard, as privacy didn't seem to concern Carrie much. All she had left were her chunky high heels, emphasizing her complete nudity. "What about your clothes, Dave?" she teased. "Seems a bit one-sided at the moment." I reached out and caressed her breast, reveling in the tautness of her skin, then ran my hands down her body, exploring each curve that yielded to my touch. She felt incredible to touch and feel. "I have a surprise for you," I said, pulling out some cord from my pocket. "Goodness, Dave, you're quite the surprise," she exclaimed joyfully, holding out her hands for me to bind her wrists. "Not too tight, please," she pleaded, though I knew to secure them firmly. Gently lifting her arms above her head, I laid her back across the desk, clearing away a few papers to make space. "Oh God, Dave, I love being dominated. I love being tied up. How did you know? Did Jessie tell you we do this with Nick?" Of course, she hadn't, and I had no idea, but I just chuckled and proceeded, more determined than ever to follow through. I secured the cord binding her wrists to a desk handle and stepped back to admire my handiwork. She looked stunning, her naked body beginning to gleam with sweat from her excitement, her dark eyes glowing with anticipation. She was breathing rapidly, almost panting, with a smile that conveyed pure desire. "Come on, Dave, hurry up and get your clothes off," she urged eagerly. "I'm not done yet," I replied sharply, securing one of her legs to the side of the desk. "What are you doing, Dave?" Carrie demanded, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. But as I stroked the bare mound between her thighs, she groaned in pleasure and her apprehensions faded. "Dave, Dave, what are you doing?" she called out as I took her other ankle and tied it to the opposite side of the desk, spreading her legs wide and stretching them to their limit with the tension on the cord. "Dave, I'm not comfortable with this," Carrie cried, the worry in her voice becoming more evident. "Please, Dave, stop. It's too tight, and you're scaring me." Ignoring her protests, I returned to the cord securing her wrists, tightening it further and elongating her position across the desk. "You bastard," she screamed at me. "Let me go, it hurts. What do you want from me? Fuck me all you want, but please let me go." I had never intended to have sex with her, not at all. My only aim was revenge for what she had done to my family. But she wanted me to fuck her, so why not? I hadn't had sex in months because of her. So why not? I undid my zipper and pulled out my cock, knowing I wouldn't need much effort to get hard. Despite my hatred for her, she was beautiful, and lying naked and helpless like that made her irresistible. I teased her pussy with my fingers, and she screamed, but she couldn't hide that she was ready, her juices flowing from her open pussy. Then I thrust my cock into her without hesitation, gripping her hips and pulling them towards me until her bottom nearly lifted off the desk and her legs were spread wide, as if doing the splits. I didn't care how much it hurt her wrists, and judging by her reaction, neither did she, at least for the moment. I thrust into her with all the force I could muster, and she moaned and groaned, throwing her head back in abandon. It didn't last long, at least not for me. I came into her with a force that rivaled any experience with Jessie. Done with her, I straightened up, wiped my glistening cock on her thigh to dry it, then put it away and zipped up. "What about me, Dave?" she wailed. "Please don't stop, I'm not finished. Please, do it again, please, I beg you." I enjoyed the idea of her begging, but I had my satisfaction, and her desires didn't concern me. So I stood there and watched as she writhed in torment, unable to even touch herself to ease the frustration that must have been consuming her. That's when she began to curse me, calling me every name imaginable and demanding that I untie her. No chance. It was relatively simple to maneuver the corner of the desk so that her exposed sex faced the door, ignoring her whimpers and curses, and still uncertain of my next move. Then I had an idea. I rummaged through the desk drawer and found what I needed, a ball of thin string, likely kept there for bundling papers or similar tasks. Ignoring Carrie's protests, I grasped her breast and squeezed hard, causing her to squeal, then threaded the string through the ring in her erect nipple and tied it securely. I unraveled the ball of string toward the door. "Dave, please, what are you doing? You're scaring me, please stop," she pleaded amidst sobs. But I paid her please no heed. The string reached the door, where I fastened it to a hook. Since the door opened outward, it made the setup easier. I checked the tension to ensure that when the door opened, it would pull at her nipple firmly but not tear the ring out. "Carrie," I called to her. "Carrie." I raised my voice when she didn't respond. "I'm leaving now, and I doubt we'll ever see each other again." "You can't leave me like this, Dave. Please, you can't. No one will be back until morning, and my boss is always the first one in." That unexpected detail was a bonus, so I did a quick mental calculation. "Then you have about 12 or 13 hours to think about what you've done to me, how you've ruined my life. I hope he fires you, and I hope everyone in that damn office gets a piece of you first." Carrie wailed in despair, realizing her helpless predicament, then began shouting and cursing at me, hurling insults once more. I turned and walked to the door, hearing her squeal as I pushed it open and the string tugged at her nipple. I glanced back once, taking in the sight that her boss would find in the morning, her legs spread wide, her pussy exposed, a mixture of my cum and her juices already pooling on the edge of the desk from her leaking vagina. Good luck explaining that, I thought to myself, giving the string a final tug as I closed the door, relishing the squeal that cut through her curses. I needed a drink after that, actually quite a few drinks, and didn't get home until late, by which time Jessie was already in bed. The next morning, I was up early, showered, and dressed before Jessie came down to the kitchen. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Shouldn't you be at work?" "Taking the day off," I replied, trying to sound as normal as possible, knowing that by then, Carrie's boss would have discovered her sprawled across the desk. "Thought we might sit down and talk about us and our problems," I suggested, hoping against hope that we could still salvage something. "Oh," she replied, looking flustered. "Yes, we should do that, Dave." She paused briefly, then continued, "How about this afternoon? I have an appointment at the gym, and Gordon gets upset if I miss it." "So, Gordon's more important than our marriage?" I asked pointedly, knowing it wasn't really about the gym but about Nick and their affair. "Don't be ridiculous, Dave." "Of course not," she responded quickly. "I just have a regular commitment every Thursday morning. You know that, sweetheart. I wouldn't want to let anyone down, would I?" I wondered if she realized how much she had already let me down. Our relationship had deteriorated to a point where a rendezvous with Nick, and possibly Carrie too, seemed more important than our future together. "Please, Dave, please understand," she pleaded. "You know I love you, and I want to fix things so we can be like we were before. Let's talk this afternoon. I'll be more prepared then." "Bitch," I thought bitterly. Even now, she was lying to me, trying desperately to delay so she could be with her lover. How had this become the woman I once loved so deeply? "Okay, Jessie, I understand," I managed to say, glancing at the clock. "You don't have to leave for another half hour. Why don't we at least start by revisiting the old days and spend some time together upstairs?" She looked surprised and stumbled over her words. "Well, Jessie, what do you say?" I pressed gently. I would, yes, of course I'd love to, but... "Oh, yes, I have to get Emily ready for the creche," she stammered out, almost with relief. "No need," I replied firmly. "I'm home all day, and she doesn't need to go today." "I think she should go anyway," Jessie insisted, grasping at excuses. I've already called to let them know she won't be there, I asserted. Oh, was all Jessie managed, visibly shaken in near tears. So, what do you say, Jessie? A quick moment together. It'll be like when we first met, anytime, anywhere, I offered, hoping for some semblance of our past intimacy. Yes, it used to be like that, didn't it? Jessie recalled nostalgically. But really, Dave, not now, not this morning. I've already showered and need to change with the other women. I don't want ____. Well, I don't want to get all messed up ____ with your ____, well, you know, all over me. It would just be too embarrassing. Really, I muttered under my breath, fully aware it was her lover she didn't want to catch her in such a state. Oh, come on, Dave, it's not that bad. Wait for this afternoon. I'll make it up to you then, and I'll show you how much I really love you. You'll see, I promise you. I saw all right. I saw how much she prioritized her time with her lover over spending any with me, even for just postponing one session. It turned my stomach, but I decided to needle her a bit more. Jessie, I could drop you off at the gym afterward. It would be quicker, and you wouldn't have to find parking. No, Dave. Jessie almost screamed, then quickly regained composure as she realized her outburst. I mean, no thanks, Dave. It's really not necessary. No, indeed, I thought to myself. Not since the gym is in the opposite direction of Nick and Carrie's place. Okay, I understand, I said with a smile, curious about how she would respond to my next suggestion. I could see her visibly relax, feeling relieved at being let off. If you're not keen on getting all messy, Jessie, I said calmly, how about a blowjob? How about sucking my cock, now that it doesn't seem so terrible anymore? Jessie turned pale as she looked at me with surprise. I doubted she could believe what I had just proposed, and she clearly didn't know how to respond. Come on, I urged, undoing my trousers. It won't take more than a few minutes, and then I'll be happy to wait for the rest. Dave, she began hesitantly, unsure of what to say. She stood there watching as I exposed myself, now fully aroused, offering myself to her. Dave, I don't think we have time, she said, swallowing nervously. Don't be silly, I insisted. It'll only take a few minutes. Jessie slowly knelt down, her face showing shock, and tentatively took hold of me. Her hand trembled as she opened her mouth wide, guiding me in. It seemed she forgot she was supposed to be inexperienced in this, and for the next 10 minutes, she gave me the best blowjob of my life. Not that there had been many before, and none with Jessie herself until that moment. I felt myself reaching climax, but I didn't let on. When she sensed it, I held her head firmly, not allowing her to pull away, and released fully into her mouth. She gagged and coughed, and I let her withdraw. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, trying to clean away the traces from her lips, finally swallowing instead of spitting it out on the carpet, which was the only other option. She stared at me in disbelief, her face showing the shock of what had just transpired. I should go wash my mouth, she exclaimed, not bothering to ask if I had enjoyed it, despite it being her first time doing it for me. No, Jessie, I said firmly, gripping her arm and guiding her towards the front door. That took longer than expected. You need to get going or you'll be late. Ignoring her protests, I gently ushered her out the door, handing her the car keys, and watched as she reluctantly made her way to her car. Explain that away, I thought, hoping she wouldn't bother, knowing Nick would soon kiss her with my essence still in her mouth, much like what had happened to me. She glanced back at me once. It wasn't a loving look, nor one of hatred. It was shame. She knew I understood what she was up to, and she was ashamed of herself. That satisfied me, but it didn't weaken my resolve. I'll see you later then, she called out, tears streaming down her cheeks, before rushing to her car, crying openly as she took off down the street. I calculated I had plenty of time. The police wouldn't come for me anytime soon, and only if Carrie decided to press charges, which seemed unlikely. Jessie wouldn't be able to face me once she found out what I had done to Carrie. I regretted not having time to plan revenge against Nick, but ultimately, the two women bore the brunt of my anger. Besides, Poor Nick would have to handle two deeply affected women, and perhaps that would be punishment enough. After getting Emily ready and packing a few last things, I walked out to my Jaguar. I took a final look at our rented house. It had been a wonderful home where we made good memories, but I had already given notice as Jessie couldn't afford the rent alone anymore. She had lost her job, and I had emptied our bank accounts, leaving her a few £100 to manage for a couple of weeks. I wasn't sure how she would manage financially. Then I headed to the airport for a late morning flight to Ireland on Ryanair. That's where I was born. Though I had enjoyed my time in the UK, I was ready to return home and raise Emily as a true Irish girl. I fought hard to prevent Jessie from having custody rights, especially given her financial situation. Eventually, we reached a compromise allowing regular visits from her parents, Ian and Margaret, whom I respected and who hadn't judged me for my actions. They became frequent visitors, real grandparents to Emily, and when I had 2 more children with Noreen, my new wife, they became godparents to them both. It might seem unusual, but it helped solidify my new family. And what about the other 3? Well, Ian and Margaret kept me updated. Carrie didn't lose her job, but someone took a photo and posted it online. She couldn't face returning to work after that. Soon after, she and Nick broke up, and I have no clue what became of him. Jessie and Carrie went off to America together and ended up working in some kind of topless bar when they ran out of money. Jessie only lasted a couple of weeks before returning to the UK. As far as I know, Carrie is still out there, flaunting her assets to everyone. Jessie did remarry, but it didn't last long. She caught her husband in bed with their neighbor. Poetic justice, in a way. When Emily turned 15, Ian and Margaret began suggesting it might be time for Jessie to see her again. Initially, I resisted, and Emily seemed unsure. But with Noreen's encouragement and the pressure from Emily's sisters, I eventually relented. I almost cried when I saw Emily off on the plane, a Ryanair flight to Luton. She called us every day during her visit. When she returned, all she said was, "Jessie, my other mom." I guess she was okay. She never expressed a desire to visit her again. For the first time in all those years, I felt a pang of sympathy for Jessie. I suppose she truly paid the price for betraying me. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. Please vote and share your opinions. It really means a lot to me, whether positive or negative. Was I too harsh on Jessie? Did Carrie receive her just desserts? Thanks for watching and have a great day. Write your opinion in the comments.